you. It is traditional to give people something to look forward to, so at the end of this talk, you can all get drinks. I've also discovered a new thing about this design summit, which is different from any other conference that I've presented at. Here we need to start by asserting our dramatic and theatrical bona fides. I think it's important for you to know that I was Alfred the Christmas elf at many of the third-tier malls in Edmonton, Alberta. I was the jester in a number of medieval feasts held throughout rural Alberta, in which members of the Elks and Rotary Club got to eat meat with their bare hands and finish the evening by hurling the bones at the jester, yes. So, unless you've been on a stage where they're throwing actual knuckles at you, shut the hell up. I got you all. All right. I'm old. I don't know how this will play, although it's the right room. How many people know what is about to happen here? How many people know the story? Right. It's Narnia, right? Lucy Pevensey and the rest of the Pevensey kids have been moved out of London because of the Blitz. They've gone to live with their eccentric uncle, and they're playing a game of hide and seek throughout the house. And Lucy goes to this old room and she finds this wardrobe, and she looks inside and she decides to hide there, and she goes back behind the coats, and then behind the coats there are branches, and behind the branches there's a forest, and then there's a clearing, and it's snow, and there's a lantern, and even what the hell. And it's amazing. Like, I so respect the work of everyone in this room. I just want that. I read this book when I was 8, which is the same age that Lucy was. So she went to Narnia. I read about her going to Narnia. She wins. But we're going to fix that. Because at the end of this talk, y'all are going to go out and make that. Okay? So I have a certain take which is informed by my history like everybody else's, so I'll do a very brief history of my life. I decided, I read The Lord of the Rings when I was 7, and I decided that I was going to go to Middle-earth. Yes. I somehow did not find a bus that would take me from Edmonton, Alberta to Middle-earth. Also, I was allergic to horses. So, to my incredible disappointment, I had to settle for the second best thing, and I decided that second best thing would be writing books like that would take other people into those places. And I was very confident in that career choice through the ensuing 10 years without it even occurring to me that I should probably write something sometime. I just figured that it was ordained. By the time I went to college, I put myself through college running LARPs for D&Ders who would steal the money to cover it from their mom's purses or cash their Social Security checks or what have you, which was awesome. And I wrote murder mystery dinner theaters for mid-30s yuppies, which was less awesome. For all the reasons that you guys know better than any other audience I will ever see. I finally put those things aside, and I decided that I could no longer do that. I had to focus on a real money-making job, which would be writing science fiction and fantasy novels. So, obviously, I was bright but not smart. You know what I'm saying? So here are some of the books. I wrote 10 or 12 books. These ones have been arranged. These are the most highly critically acclaimed. Or we could look at the largest selling. Yes, that's right. That's right. I'm the author of the only Yoda-focused. I will 100% not be doing the voice. The only exception is this book, which actually outsold the Yoda book by a lot, to my shock and surprise, because I got pretty used to not selling many copies of books. I was very comfortable with that niche. This book and the couple that came out after it have sold about 1 million copies worldwide. They're in 20 countries and 13 languages. And some obvious things you can see that are weird. It's got like a phone number on the front, and you can call it, and they're like torn up photographs and numbers and menus and date books with stuff scribbled in them, and you can see there's a URL and whatnot. And lots of drawings and marginalia, and so it was different, right? This was 2006 when this book came out. So what happened between the last books that looked like books and this book that looks like book 2.0? Very quick story about this. So I'm standing in the editor's office for Bloomsbury in the UK, and I get a call saying that the American edition of the book has just won an award for Best Book for Reluctant Readers. I said, I'm sorry. Did I just win an award for writing a book for people who don't like books? And the British editor said, oh, but just think, there are so many more of them. All right. So what happened between the other books and this book? So you probably know it cheated. So you all know the answer is that between those other books and this book, I ended up working on something called alternate reality games. This room probably, is there anyone who's unclear about an alternate reality game? We all know. Okay, I can just skip that part. That's amazing. So ARGs work across a lot of platforms, and they use the platforms of your life, and we don't care about, is it a video, or is it a book, or is it a pamphlet, or is it a website? You all know the basic syllabus. So I'll just skip what is normally a long slide and go to this bit, which is, when a story touches your life and comes across those channels, it becomes very personal, like it's a different artifact. The characters who are communicating with you are communicating in a way and as often as that cousin you kind of like who lives in Cleveland, but you rarely see. But it's still family. So as an example, one of the reasons that I knew that we were doing something very important and different and out of my experience, in a world in which, by the way, the biggest search engine was Alta Vista. That's how long ago this was. So you could look up stuff on Alta Vista and find websites. We also sent things to fax machines. I will explain to the younger people what those were later. So one of the main characters of the story had been raised by her grandmother, and in the course of events, the grandmother died. There was, we updated every Tuesday. There was a series of events, and the grandmother died. Wednesday morning, I woke up and I went to the inbox of this character, and there were hundreds of condolence emails. And they said, Laia, I'm so sorry for your loss. They said, Laia, I was raised by my grandmother too. They said, I lost my grandfather this week. I know just how you feel. Goosebumps, right? Like, take it from a guy who's published 10 novels. People do not write you like that after they read your book. In fact, it was such a different experience, and those who have heard parts of this talk before know what's coming next. The best thing that happens to me when I write a book is maybe I get a nice review, or I might even win an award. At the end of every major alternate reality game, I've been invited to a wedding. Because two people met playing the game and fell in love over the course of it, and it was so important to their relationship that they wanted the people who made it at the wedding. No pressure, but that's the bar. If you're doing this in 10 years and you haven't been invited to a wedding, TV will take you back. It's okay. All right. So, yeah, I should hit the button at the right, yeah, okay. So, what do I want to say about that experience? Things that I learned. Here's one of the things I've learned. This is how we used to make art. That's a book or a movie or a video game, and we would put it out there. Stephanie Riggs was talking about this. Here's an art object. There is the audience who now can come consume my art object. And, you know, ARGs don't work that way, and I would argue the rest of the world doesn't work that way anymore either. We've undergone a Copernican revolution where the audience, a word that means to hear, but now needs to have way more verbs attached, sits in the center of the universe, and orbiting around it is that thing you made and the fan fiction that people wrote about the thing you made and the social media conversation about the thing you made and the app. Like, it's a different world, right? And we have to think about the user experience leading everything. I'm like holding on to some kinds of narrative because, you know, otherwise I'm out of work. But I am 100% with my more programmatic brethren in saying we have to foreground the user's experience all the time. I gave a talk a few years ago called The Tyrant in Winter, which basically says we have come to a Magna Carta moment in which we as authors and creators just have had power ripped away from us, and we have to try to give up as little as possible, but pretend like it's all good. Very fast stat that I will drop in since I got the time back from explaining what ARGs are. Some of you have heard this before, but my favorite stat about how who controls a work of art, is it the audience or is it the creator? We had a pretty good run this year with the last Star Wars movie, and the decision about whether Luke Skywalker should die and whether Rey was going to turn out. And you watched a power struggle, like we had to send the knights in there and put down some peasants because they really tried to take that away. So here's a stat for you. On one website, Archive of Our Own, which is fanfiction, how many people are fanfiction people in the room? Some? Few? Archive of Our Own is one of the two biggest, oldest, currently actively used fanfiction websites. And I'm going to talk about Harry Potter stories. I'm not counting the other stuff. I'm not counting all of these specific Harry Potter fan sites. On Archive of Our Own alone, a year ago, there were more complete stories set in the world of Harry Potter than there are words in the first 5 novels. Not only has J.K. Rowling written less than 1% of all the words ever written about Hogwarts and Harry, J.K. Rowling has written less than 50% of all the words ever read about Harry and Hogwarts. It is a different world, and we must bitterly fight. I mean, we must embrace this new egalitarian world. So these guys, they have more power now. Fine. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to try positing a posit for you. People like things to be easy. If you're super old like me, you can remember when you used to have to wait until 8 o'clock on Thursday to watch a TV show you wanted to watch. If you're young, you probably literally don't remember that. This has some implications for all of us, even those of us in this room who think we're doing cutting edge work. Here's one reason. Annual movie tickets per capita. 1945, the average American went to the movies 30 times, once every 2 weeks, a little more. By 1965, it's about 5, and has stayed more or less constant since then. What happened? TV, right? Turns out, if you could watch something for free on your couch, as much as people, I mean, oh my God, I live in LA now, and the number of people who want to tell me about the amazing cinematic experience, like, dudes, it's over. Your opera. That is, I'm sorry. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But cinema as a dominant cultural juggernaut, I'm just saying opera was huge. Because it turns out people like to go home and do things on their couch. And we're probably going to want to be prepared for that. You know what's great on a couch is a good book. So we had this phrase, home theater, which meant I have a big-ass TV and some awesome speakers and maybe a subwoofer. My long-term buddy Alon has bolted subwoofers under his house to have the most amazing sound experience you can possibly have, except all the nails fell out of his home. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell that story, but the sound was amazing. Anyway, that's what we use the phrase home theater to mean. That's not what it's going to mean in 5 years. Because what the people in this room are going to be building is home theater. Some guy said, and I forget who it was, that all the world is a stage. We're going to make that true. Here are some examples. I work now for a company called Magic Leap. We make augmented reality goggles. You probably know that. Smart home devices, Google Home or Alexa, and the ability to combine those technologies with voice interfaces and our ability to render increasingly lifelike figures inside game engine-like environments is going to mean that all the stuff that you guys are working so hard on building for location-based experiences is going to be starting to be in people's houses in 5 years. That's at least my assertion, because it sounds good when you say things boldly. The reality is like, I don't know, funding or, yeah. So the first day I got asked to come in to talk to folks at Magic Leap, I was asked, so what do you think we should make? What should mixed reality storytelling be? And my first answer was like, I don't know, but it shouldn't be other stuff, right? TV is not broken. VR is sometimes broken, but sometimes awesome. Video games, super not broken. All those things work. And if it's working well there, like, let's not do that. Let's make something that understands the real affordances of mixed reality. It happens, it's me, it's my house, I'm here, and yet something awesome is going to happen. It's my world, it's my space is going to be my stage. So my modest proposal that day was, well, hide and seek. I want to have Nazgul come into my house, and I hide from them, and I'm behind the couch and they can't see me, but then they come around the couch and they can, and oh my God! Because you cannot do that on an Xbox. I used to work for Xbox, so I can say that. It has tremendous tactility, right? There's this. That's just a different deal. Also tough on the audio. So I said, let's make hide and seek. So let's think about what that would take, right? To make hide and seek work and make it work in your own house, first of all, we need spatial awareness, right? We have to understand your house. We need to know that you have a couch and that when you're behind it, you can't be seen. Like, we have to dynamically do that, and we can't just rig it. Like, the beauty of a location-based thing where you design it is you get to build all that stuff. But we're talking about making things that can port into whatever living room you're in and work. So we got to map the space. We need someone to play with, right? Like, the whole point of hide and seek is we got to make a character to play hide and seek with. It might be a Nazgul and super creepy, or it might be Pooh and Christopher Robin, or it might be, you know, put your own. I just had a non-family rated thought, but I'm going to pass right on by. And lastly, by a way to play, I just mean we have to be able to talk to one another. Like, something I do, that motion or action has to be responded to by the construct we've made. Does that make sense? We need an interface so that it can respond. So let's talk about those parts in brief. Spatial awareness. I live in Los Angeles. I work for a company headquartered in Florida, so of course, I am org charted in Seattle. I work with a bunch of guys in Seattle with a science fiction writer named Neil Stevenson, who got me that ARG job back in 2000 because they asked him first, and he said, the whole book thing's working out pretty good for me, but I got a broke friend. So if you can just be poverty-stricken enough, you'll eventually say yes to even the stupidest damn sounding things. So with this team in Seattle, there are a bunch of people called Goat Labs, and they launched on an Apollo-level difficulty mission, which was to put virtual baby goats in your living room. Because obviously. One, because baby goats are hella cute and they kill on YouTube. But also because it's a good test case. Can we put a virtual object with complicated behaviors that will really dynamically interact with any space we port it into? So I'm going to, moment of truth, video plays, all right. See how you can't see the goat when the goat goes behind the chair? That's called occlusion, and it really, really matters. It's hard. This kind of tech tends to just put a shiny object there and not know that it's behind stuff. Everything in this room is real except the goats. So when they're jumping on that table or up to that table or on the couch, those are real tables and couches. The goats are just actually navigating the space. Enough goats. So the way that works is with something called the dense mesh adapter. So it scans the room and returns a point cloud mesh. I know I'm talking gibberish to some and belaboring the obvious to others, but it then translates that mesh, which is a sort of standard thing that comes back when you're doing machine vision stuff. It translates that into game primitives. For those who didn't do that part of the course, it just means we're translating what it's seeing and putting it into a 3D format such that we see a bunch of things and it's a flat planar surface, and we tell the game engine, put a wall there, and the game engine comes with all this stuff, like it knows what walls do. So now if I take a virtual ball and I throw it, it will bounce the way it's supposed to because the game engine is handling all of that stuff. So it also assigns points of interest for pathing. So now the goats know that you don't walk through couches, you walk between them, you have to jump on tables. And if you jump, here is a place that you can jump and you won't look stupid because you won't be standing like with one hoof on and three hoofs off. Okay, so here is the dense mesh adapter working in real time. So as you can see, it's scanning once every 2 to 3 seconds. In fact, the mesh is returned much faster than that. It's translating it into game primitives that's taking more time. For any work being done with AR, you're going to need this kind of speed of understanding your environment, right? Like when I had another company that was doing this stuff in 2011. It was like, okay, take 10 minutes and scan your room. It's like, dude, come on. So this is working well. Interesting side point, it's super good at seeing that something is there. You know what's really hard? Taking it back out again. So if a person was standing there and we mapped it, and then the person left the room, it's much harder for the mesh to say, are you sure it's not there anymore? So it's, someone mentioned earlier that algorithms come up with problems that we didn't realize would be problems. This is one of them. It's harder to be affirmative about the absence of things. Anyway, so we've now made the possibility for your room to be a stage, right? We have physics. Things are going to act right. We have pathing. We have occlusion, so things don't look weird and ghosty all the time. And that is all the stuff we need to create motivated behavior, just as if we were in a video game, right? So we might, for instance, take food and fire it from a tiny cannon, because programmers. And then the goats we haven't told them where to go. We've just supplied the motivation that they like food, and they will go wherever it is in the room, and they will operate creatively, independently, dynamically, as Stephanie was saying, in the environment. And we don't know exactly what they're going to do, and you get to affect that by where you put the food, whatever. All make sense? Okay. I know what you were thinking right now. You were thinking, wait. What if the goats were fired from a cannon and abducted by aliens? Well, I'm glad you asked. It might look a little bit like this. And I'm so sorry I don't have the sound on, because the sound is great. Watch. It breaks into tiny goats. I was like going through the files to do a talk, and I was like, dudes, really? But I mean, awesome. Aside from the fun and games and goats, though, you get the point. Hey, we actually have working tech right now that will map your space as an environment in which shit can happen, okay? Phase 2, we need someone to do something with. We need someone to play hide and seek with. So there are a number of ways of attacking that. Someone earlier was talking about volumetric capture. You know the basic ideas. We film people with a zillion cameras, and they do a performance, and then we port it into your space. Here's an example that we did. The room is a real room, okay? The little drifty moat things are not real, and good, we have some volume. So we got the Royal Shakespeare Company to work with us.
All the world's a stage. All the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, fueling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Last scene of all.
We skipped a couple of ages.
Ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Someone's teeth, someone's eyes, someone's taste, someone's everything.
All right, so that's cool, right? And by the way, good actors are good, and they help. News flash, it's a tip. Now you know. So the thing that's cool about volumetric capture is that it's super relatable, right? It's a real human giving a real human performance. And as a side effect, for those of you who work with a lot of polygons, things like the hair can look like hair and the cloth can drape. If you watch the way his shirt draped, that's hard to do with traditional modeling. The difficulty is it's not interactive. There are people working on that problem, and I could go down that rat hole, but let's start there for the moment. The guy gave the performance he gave, and whatever you're doing in the environment is not going to respond to that without a fair amount of jiggering around. There are people now who can do sort of limited, there's a couple of tool chains I know about which will let you make little adjustments like his eyes will follow you, but it's really not the same as you saying, hey dude, do you have a ham sandwich, and something happening. So the opposite to that, right, are virtual characters. Here's a traditional game thing that's from a thing we did called Dr. Gordwart's Invaders. One thing that is cool as trompe-l'oeil is because this guy is being broadcast and is obviously a holograph, it makes the little robot broadcasting him look more real because art works that way. That's real and made of metal and stuff because this guy's all ghosty. So you get that. It's a game character, right? So you can make it enormously responsive and adaptive. Even if you're just writing trees, you can give him a tremendous latitude of possible responses, and he can also interact with the environment. But it feels and looks like a game, which to some people is I think we all have gotten a lot better at understanding the things you can do with either game-type characters or cartoonish characters. And yet there are certain kinds of experiences you're just not going to have with that kind of representation. So this is a project. This is a completely virtual person made in our lab in Culver City. She's going to do a couple of checks, and then you'll see an expression. Just watch. So I don't know about you, but that was a game changer for me. I saw that first a year and a half ago, slightly different version of the model. And I got home and my family sort of asked me, what was it like? Was it being there? Was it like, could you tell it from human? I said, oh, you could totally tell it from a human. It's a person made of light. But it's a person. Like, it's a person made of light. You know that you can't shake her hand in exactly the same way. But it is way on the other side of the uncanny valley, at least for me. There are a lot of technical things to be said about this. One of the things I'm really proud about our company for doing is they've put a woman named Alice Rowe, who's the creator behind Her Story and a bunch of other things, a very strong female feminist orientation to be driving this project, which is awesome and needed to happen. So I'm really, really excited about that. This suddenly makes a whole bunch of things about what we could do feel a whole lot more plausible, right? Because now we have someone who looks human enough that you can immediately read expressions on the faces. There's tons of more recent footage. And you can have a lot of experiences. You know, when you walk into a room, Micah will turn around and follow you. If they're building things to run through emotional responses. If you are too close to her, she'll, be creeped out and move away. So it's really feels relatable, and yet it is dynamic and interactive. There are some things that, when you have that level of fidelity in the face, it makes speech paradoxically harder, because you can't just have her mouth do this, right? You have to articulate. So it's not that it's a solved problem, but if you hadn't seen that before, it's got to make you think, right? Okay, ways to play. How can Micah or the Nazgul or me and Piglet and Pooh interact? So here's a list of the ones that we use in Magic Leap, and I'll just go very fast through some examples. Everyone knows what a controller looks like in a video game, right? In Dr. Wardbort's, you're shooting robots with your controller. My favorite moment in Dr. Wardbort's is you're shooting robots with your controller and you're throwing up a shield just with your hand. That feels better. So, not to be revealed outside this room, but I don't exactly play video games. I'm modestly famous in geek circles for writing a giant several things for Halo. So if we could keep that on the down low. But I just don't want to do this. I would much rather throw up a shield with my hand. Okay. Everyone has done this, right? Wingardium Leviosa. Totally my curiosity. How many people here have written or designed a Harry Potter pitch? Am I the only one? No? Good. Right, okay. Because you had to, right? And all of us have figured out how to do Wingardium Leviosa at some tech stack or another. But now we can do that and do that well. These are not the droids you're looking for. Right? Simple. I'm going to do a sci-fi geeky thing here. How many people in the audience know Doctor Who? Oh, I like you so much. Harder one, how many people know the episode Blink? For those of you who do not know, Blink is the greatest moment in the history of television production because it is the single most terrifying special effect ever made from literally a $10 garden statue. The premise of Blink is that there are these fearsome beings that turn into stone if you ever look at them. But if you look away, they cut closer, and they keep coming from you. And they look like, they call them weeping angels, and they look like garden statues. But if you look somewhere else, or a loud noise happens, or you blink even for a second, then you come back and they're like this. And from the point of view of TV, it's awesome, and it costs like a nickel. So what is another way to say that? Well, eye gaze, smart home lights, we can make this. And I don't mean we can make this conceptually, I mean, I sat down with a team in Florida and we made this. So we're actually tracking, you looked away, it's closer. Once you open this Pandora's box and you stop thinking about controllers, one of the reasons I'm excited to have this conversation with the people in this room is that I actually think the people from a theatrical background are going to do more interesting things than people from gaming background because you won't be so obsessed with a controller and understand so much the conventions of the controller. Which, by the way, I think people should make awesome games. I just want people to also make things that my wife would do, or honestly me. People who don't want to spend too much time with a game controller. Okay, so when we add all of this up, you have the sense that the home is a stage, right? We can map it so it's a place to play, we have someone to play with, and we have a way to interact with that person. And now I'm going to tell you a tragic story. And I know some of you have heard it before. But on my oldest daughter's 11th birthday, she came out of her room into the living room weeping. She was crying on her birthday because what had not arrived in the night? Her Hogwarts letter. You need to fix this. Gabe is an organizer of this conference. They had a baby 3 weeks ago. You've got 11 years. Get it done. One of those earlier pitches was called the Lost Letter Academy because of this. So, can we do this? Of course we can do this. Can we make that letter? Of course we can, as a virtual object. Hell, we can make an owl fly into your room. We can make that owl perch on top of the curtain railings, but not perch where there's no curtain railings. We can make the letter drop, and because we understand the room, if it drops on the bed, it will stay at that height, and if it drops on the floor, it will stay at that height. Like, we can make that easily. And then once we've done that, and there's a little girl, let's call her anything in the world besides Caitlin, and she looks up because from the next room, she can hear Dobby's voice saying, "Caitlin, Caitlin, find me, help me." Because there's someone calling to her from elsewhere in the room saying, "You've got about 10 minutes. So she can go in and she can meet a character Doesn't even have to be as high-res a character as Micah is. And she can begin to have a conversation with that character. I know all the limits. I've done so much work with language, so I know all the ways you have to fudge it. But that's a thing that we can do, and we should. I'll speed up just a little bit. I want to talk about this. So I've talked about the physical setting. I've talked about the interactive a little bit. I want to circle around to a different way of saying the same thing everyone else does, because that's what a conference is. So the first speaker of the day, whom I enjoyed very much, used the phrase writing to the metal, of getting down to using our art form to get people to have theatrical or artistic experiences they couldn't have otherwise. And I will give you a short example of one of mine that I was happiest with. We did let me say this, really unsuccessful, little followed ARG. To make it clear that I have had so many low sales novels. But the design of the ARG, which we did for a video game called Gun, there were a lot of things about the design I really liked. And my favorite thing is there was a character who was a ghost in the story, as there so often is. It's so useful to have people who are almost there, but not quite. And his name was Lucky, and he would do you a favor. He would help you out in the progress of the story or the game if you would do a favor for him. So there are things called small favors. And here's my favorite small favor. Lucky would help you out if, in exchange, you would go to a cemetery and find the grave of someone who died on the day you were born. And just do something nice for them. Whatever you want. And just tell them about it. And people did this. Some people went alone. Some people went with friends or spouses. Some people brought their kids. And they went into graveyards, and they found the stone of someone who had left the world at the moment they were entering it. And some just cleaned up. Some left flowers. One left a bottle of scotch. Some did a drawing. And at the end of the game, a number of people said that was the most profound artistic experience they'd ever had. More so than any book or movie, because they were there in their bodies with all the weight of mortality and experience, but held inside the capsule of the art. And they had this profound full body experience. So I'm very much in favor of trying to build that kind of thing into what we make. So I thought I would close by a short example of the kind of thing that I would hope that we are making in the next few years, and that we have all the ability to make right now. So I happen to be working on a giant story world with Neil Stevenson at Magic Leap right now. And part of it involves an elsewhere called Old Gnarly, which you might think of as our world if magic was real and science never happened. So imagine that I am working late. I'm in my study or whatever, and it's getting on. And then I look up and I begin to hear a sound like the wind, but as if the wind were inside the room. Which I can do because I have Alexa speakers throughout my home. And then I began to see what looked like leaves, little golden fluttery things beginning to drift into the room, but they were all going more or less in one direction, as if on a current of air. And I got up and I followed them down, and they went outside the study and around the corner and down the hall and down to the stairs into the basement. And here I had a moment of thinking, should I not go into the basement? But that's movies. This is a new art form. Maybe it will be great to go into the basement. So I followed the trail of leaves down into the basement, and as I go, when I get to the bottom, it's like my basement. It has the same brick walls, and yet it's been transformed somehow. And in it, I have 3 children. I have 2 children, but there are 3 here. And this guy here is standing in front of a mirror. I'm actually looking at him through the mirror, and it's me. When you put on a Magic Leap pair of glasses, you have to train it on yourself with an app so that it can set the right eyepiece. So in other words, we have your face. We could do that. We would ask permission. I hasten to add. So I'm looking at me, and I'm looking at me in another world that's my house, but not my house, and kids who might be my kids in this other world. And other me says, I don't know what to do. I'm in distraction. Our eldest has a cut on her leg, and it's become infected, and we don't know what to do, and the Rat Queen won't help. And I say, who's the Rat Queen? And the Rat Queen is the powerful sorceress who lives in the tower at the top of the castle, unlike down in the dungeon with her. But she suggested that maybe I could help. So I was like, I don't know what to tell you. And he says, you've got to find some way to help heal her leg because there is no magic available to do that. So I go upstairs and I try to think about what to do, and I Google leg infections, and I think, wait, where did penicillin come from? And I look it up and I find out you can actually make penicillin and other antibiotics with moldy bread, or even better as oranges. And there's a process by which you can grow your own. And so the next day, at the same time when the wind begins to blow, I rush down into the basement and I say, okay, here's what you're going to do that I think could help. And they take that suggestion, and over the next couple of days, the leg begins to improve. And when I go down to the basement and the girl is healed, the me who is not me looks at me through the mirror and says, the Red Queen was very impressed. She'd like to see you in the tower. So I go up into my attic, which doesn't look quite like my attic anymore, but sort of. And in it is a beautiful woman in a red gown with a long rat's tail coming under the hem. And she says, there's something I need you to do. And that's what I would like to be making in 5 years. And that's what I think we all can be making in 5 years. Those are the kinds of tools we have and the kinds of experiences we could create. In other words, screw you, Lucy, I'm going.